The bustling cafe was alive with clinking cups and murmured conversations. Amelia Evans sat at a corner table, her coffee untouched as she stared at the foreclosure notice in her trembling hands. The red stamp at the bottom, Final Notice, seemed to pulse, mocking her helplessness. Her family's bakery, the one her mother had spent decades nurturing, was days away from being taken away. Her phone buzzed, pulling her from her thoughts. "You're late," her best friend Clara said on the other end. "I'm coming," Amelia mumbled, shoving the notice into her bag. Minutes later, she entered an upscale restaurant, the stark contrast to her modest attire making her feel out of place. At a table in the back sat Clara and a man Amelia didn't recognize. The man was striking, tall, broad-shouldered, with sharp features and an air of authority. His tailored suit and the pristine watch on his wrist screamed wealth. "Amelia, this is Alexander Knight," Clara said, her tone uncharacteristically formal. Amelia extended her hand, confused by the gravity in Clara's voice. "Nice to meet you, Mr. Knight." Alexander's handshake was firm but quick, as if pleasantries were a mere formality. "Likewise," he said, his deep voice sending an involuntary shiver down her spine. Clara leaned in, her voice dropping. "Alex has a proposition for you." "A proposition?" Amelia repeated, her eyebrows knitting together. Alexander cleared his throat, his piercing gaze locking onto hers. "I need someone to play a role for 1 week, to pretend to be my wife." Amelia blinked, certain she'd misheard him. "I'm sorry, what?" "It's a business matter," Alexander continued smoothly. "I need to finalize a merger, and my image as a stable family man is essential to closing the deal. You'll be well compensated for your time, enough to pay off your family's debt and more." Amelia's head spun. The audacity of his request was almost laughable. "You want me to pretend to be your wife? For a business deal?" "Exactly," he said, unfazed by her incredulity. Clara nudged her. "Amelia, think about it. This could save your bakery." Her heart twisted at the mention of the bakery. It was more than a business. It was her mother's legacy, her family's pride. But this was absurd. "I don't even know you," Amelia said, her voice sharp. Alexander leaned forward, his expression unreadable. "You don't need to. All you need to do is follow my lead, attend a few events, and act the part. After 1 week, we go our separate ways." "And why me?" Amelia demanded, her suspicion mounting. "You're ordinary," Alexander said bluntly. "You don't look like someone who'd be involved in a scandal or ulterior motives. That's what I need. Someone believable." The insult stung, but Amelia bit her tongue. Alexander slid a piece of paper across the table. "Here's the contract. Read it over, take your time. If you agree, the money will be transferred to your account by the end of the week." Amelia stared at the document, her hands clenching under the table. She needed the money desperately, but this was madness. "What if I say no?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Alexander didn't hesitate. "Then you walk away and I find someone else. But you'll miss the opportunity to solve your financial problems in one clean sweep." The weight of his words pressed on her. She glanced at Clara, who nodded encouragingly. "It's just 1 week," Clara said softly. Amelia's mind raced. Could she really do this? Pretend to be the wife of a man she just met? But the bakery. Taking a deep breath, she grabbed the pen Alexander offered. "Fine, I'll do it." Alexander's lips curved into a small, triumphant smile. "Smart choice. We start tomorrow." Amelia couldn't shake the sinking feeling in her chest as she left the restaurant. The decision she'd just made felt like stepping onto a tightrope without a safety net. But for her family, for the bakery, she'd do whatever it took, even if it meant pretending to be someone she wasn't. The next morning, Amelia stood outside Alexander's penthouse, clutching a small overnight bag. Her heart pounded as she rang the doorbell. The opulence of the building alone was enough to make her feel out of place, with its gold-trimmed doors and polished marble floors. She still couldn't believe she had agreed to this insane plan. The door swung open, revealing Alexander dressed casually in a crisp white shirt and dark jeans, a stark contrast to the cold businessman she'd met the day before. "You're on time," he said, stepping aside to let her in. The penthouse was breathtaking. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city, and every piece of furniture looked like it belonged in a luxury catalog. Amelia felt like an intruder in a world far removed from her own modest apartment. "I've had the guest room prepared for you," Alexander said, gesturing toward a hallway. You'll stay there for the week. Amelia nodded, her nerves making her tongue-tied. She followed him down the hall, taking in the sleek decor and the faint scent of expensive cologne that seemed to linger everywhere. The guest room was bigger than her entire apartment. A king-sized bed with plush linens dominated the space, and a walk-in closet was stocked with clothes in her size. "You had all this prepared for me?" she asked, her voice tinged with disbelief. "I did my homework," Alexander replied, leaning casually against the doorframe. "You'll need to look the part for the events we'll be attending. My assistant took care of the wardrobe." Amelia stared at the closet, feeling a mix of awe and unease. This wasn't her life. She was a bakery girl pretending to be a billionaire's wife. How was she supposed to pull this off? "Dinner is at 7, Alexander continued. "We'll be meeting some business associates. It's a small gathering, so it'll be a good warm-up for you." "Dinner?" Amelia echoed, her stomach twisting. "I thought we'd have more time to prepare." "You don't need preparation," Alexander said, his tone dismissive. "Just smile, act polite, and stay close to me. They'll believe what I tell them." His confidence grated on her nerves. "What if they ask me questions? What if they realize I don't belong?" "They won't," he said firmly. "And if they do, I'll handle it. Just follow my lead." Amelia bit her lip, unsure whether to feel reassured or irritated. She wasn't used to being told what to do, especially by someone like Alexander. At precisely 7 o'clock, Amelia emerged from the guest room, wearing one of the elegant dresses from the closet. It was a deep navy blue gown that hugged her figure without being too revealing. She felt awkward in the expensive fabric, but Clara had once told her that confidence could make or break any outfit. Alexander was waiting for her in the living room, scrolling through his phone. When he looked up, his gaze lingered for a moment before he cleared his throat. "You clean up well." "Thanks, I think," Amelia replied, not sure if it was a compliment or a critique. He walked over and offered her his arm. "Let's go." They took his private car to the restaurant, where a table of impeccably dressed men and women awaited them. As soon as they entered, all eyes turned to them. Alexander's hand rested lightly on her back, guiding her forward with a confidence that made her feel slightly steadier. "Alexander," a portly man exclaimed, rising to greet them. "And this must be the lovely wife we've heard so much about." "Indeed," Alexander said smoothly, pulling out a chair for Amelia. "Everyone, this is Amelia." Amelia forced a smile, hoping it didn't look as strained as it felt. "It's a pleasure to meet you all." The dinner was a blur of conversations about mergers, market trends, and investments. Amelia nodded politely, chiming in occasionally when addressed directly. Alexander, to her surprise, was a skilled conversationalist, effortlessly steering the discussion and deflecting questions about their relationship with charming anecdotes. "She's a quiet one," one woman commented, her tone slightly condescending. "She's always been more of a listener," Alexander said, squeezing Amelia's hand under the table. The gesture was for show, but it sent an unexpected warmth through her. By the time dessert was served, Amelia felt like she was walking a tightrope. But she had to admit, Alexander's presence made it easier. He had a way of commanding attention, ensuring she never bore the full brunt of anyone's scrutiny. When they finally left the restaurant, Amelia let out a long breath. That was intense. "You did well," Alexander said as the car pulled away. "Better than I expected." "Gee, thanks," she said dryly. But despite her sarcasm, his words gave her a small sense of accomplishment. Back at the penthouse, Alexander handed her a folder. "Here's some background information about our relationship. Read it before bed. The next few days will be busier." Amelia took the folder, her exhaustion briefly forgotten. "This is really happening, isn't it?" "It is," Alexander said, his gaze steady. "And if you keep this up, you'll have your money by the end of the week." She nodded, clutching the folder as she headed to her room. She had no idea how she was going to survive the week, but one thing was certain. There was no turning back now. The following days were a whirlwind of events, each more high stakes than the last. From charity galas to private luncheons, Amelia found herself navigating a world she had only seen in magazines. Her days were spent memorizing details about Alexander's life and their fabricated relationship, while her nights were filled with back-to-back events that tested her resolve to stay in character. At first she felt out of place, but as the week progressed, Amelia surprised herself. She learned to smile through probing questions and feigned familiarity with luxury, all while staying close to Alexander, who seemed to thrive in the limelight. Despite his cold demeanor, he had a knack for stepping in just when she needed help, deflecting suspicion with charm and precision. One evening, as they prepared for an exclusive black tie event, Amelia stood in front of the mirror in her room, fastening a pair of diamond earrings that must have cost more than her family's house. The sight of herself in the mirror was almost unrecognizable, her once simple self now transformed into a woman who looked like she belonged in Alexander's world. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Alexander entered, his tuxedo sharp and perfectly tailored. He paused, his eyes scanning her from head to toe. "You're ready. Do I look convincing enough for your crowd?" Amelia asked, her voice tinged with sarcasm, though she couldn't help but hope for a genuine answer. "You'll do," Alexander said, his tone even. But as he turned to leave, he added quietly, "You look stunning." The unexpected compliment left her momentarily speechless. She followed him to the car, her heart beating a little faster than it should. The event was a fundraiser held at a sprawling estate, complete with crystal chandeliers, a live orchestra, and an endless flow of champagne. Alexander and Amelia entered arm in arm, drawing admiring glances from the crowd. He leaned close, his breath warm against her ear. "Remember, we're deeply in love." "Right," Amelia replied, fighting the flutter in her chest as he tightened his grip on her waist. As they mingled, Amelia found herself engaged in a conversation with one of Alexander's business associates, an elegant older woman named Margaret. "You must be so proud of him," Margaret said, her eyes kind. "Alexander has always been so driven, but I can see that being with you has softened him." Amelia managed a smile, unsure how to respond. Before she could speak, Alexander appeared beside her, his hand resting lightly on her back. "Amelia keeps me grounded," he said smoothly, his tone laced with affection that felt surprisingly genuine. "She's my better half." The word sent an unexpected pang through Amelia. She knew it was all for show, but the warmth in his voice sounded real, if only for a moment. Later that night, as they returned to the penthouse, Amelia couldn't shake the weight of Margaret's words. She glanced at Alexander, who was scrolling through his phone. "Do you ever get tired of pretending?" she asked, breaking the silence. Alexander looked up, his brow furrowing slightly. "What do you mean? This life, always having to put on a show, always calculating your next move? Don't you ever want something real?" Alexander's expression darkened, and for a moment Amelia thought she had crossed a line. But then he sighed, leaning back against the seat. "Real doesn't always work out the way you think it will," he said quietly. "People have agendas, they disappoint you, it's easier to keep things simple." Amelia stared at him, taken aback by the vulnerability in his voice. "Not everyone's out to use you," she said softly. "Sometimes people just want to be there for you." Alexander turned to her, his gaze unreadable. "And what about you? Why are you here, really?" "To help my family," she said without hesitation. "They're all I have." He studied her for a long moment before nodding. "At least you're honest about it." They rode the rest of the way in silence, but something had shifted between them. For the first time, Amelia felt like she had seen a glimpse of the real Alexander, the man behind the facade. The following day, Amelia woke to find a note slipped under her door. "Meet me in the study at 10 a.m. Alexander." Curious, she made her way to the study, a grand room lined with shelves of books and adorned with an oversized desk. Alexander was seated behind it, his usual confidence intact. "I've been reviewing our arrangement," he said as she entered, gesturing for her to sit. "There's something I need to tell you." "What is it?" Amelia asked, her stomach nodding at his serious tone. Alexander hesitated, an uncharacteristic flicker of uncertainty crossing his face. "There's a reason I needed someone like you for this arrangement. The cameras you've seen at these events, they're not just for security. They're documenting everything." Amelia froze, her heart sinking. "What do you mean?" "This week isn't just about convincing the people at these events. It's also about creating a narrative for investors, a story they can believe in." "So you're filming us?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Every moment?" Alexander nodded, his expression guarded. "It was a necessary part of the plan, but I swear, nothing invasive." Amelia felt a surge of betrayal. She had agreed to play the role of his wife, but she hadn't agreed to this. "You should have told me," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I couldn't risk you backing out," Alexander said, his tone firm. "But I promise, Everything is under control. No one will see the footage except the people who need to. Amelia stared at him, torn between anger and disbelief. You used me. It's not like that, Alexander said, leaning forward. I needed someone I could trust. Trust? Amelia scoffed, rising to her feet. How can you talk about trust when you've been lying to me this whole time? Alexander stood, his expression hardening. You agreed to this arrangement. You're getting what you want, aren't you? Amelia shook her head, tears stinging her eyes. I thought I was helping my family. I didn't know I was signing up to be a pawn in your game. She turned and stormed out of the study, slamming the door behind her. For the first time since this arrangement began, she questioned whether she had made the right choice, and whether she could trust Alexander at all. Amelia locked herself in her room, her mind racing with Alexander's revelation. The thought of being filmed, every move and word recorded, left her feeling exposed. She paced back and forth, grappling with the implications of what she'd just learned. How could she have been so naive to trust him? The next morning, she decided to confront Alexander. She found him in the kitchen, sipping his coffee like nothing had happened. His calm demeanor only fueled her frustration. You owe me an explanation, Amelia said, crossing her arms. Alexander set his cup down and looked at her, his expression unreadable. I already gave you one. No, she snapped. You gave me a justification for your lies. I deserve the truth. Alexander sighed, leaning against the counter. The cameras were necessary. Investors want to believe in more than just numbers. They want a story. They want proof that I'm stable, trustworthy, capable of commitment. And you thought the best way to prove that was by tricking me into being your prop? She shot back, her voice rising. Amelia, you agreed to this arrangement, Alexander said evenly. You knew it wasn't going to be simple. I agreed to pretend to be your wife, she said, her voice shaking. Not to have my life turned into some kind of reality show. For the first time, Alexander's calm facade cracked. He stepped closer, his gaze intense. Do you think this is easy for me? Letting someone into my life like this? I've spent years building my reputation and I'm not going to let it crumble now. Amelia refused to back down. Then maybe you should have hired an actress instead of using me. There was a long silence between them, the air thick with tension. Finally, Alexander spoke, his tone softer. I didn't want an actress. I wanted someone real, someone who wouldn't feel fake. Amelia's anger wavered for a moment, but she quickly steeled herself. Well, congratulations. You got real, and it's messy and complicated, just like trust. Determined to clear her head, Amelia spent the rest of the day avoiding Alexander. She took refuge in the garden, a sprawling space filled with meticulously trimmed hedges and vibrant blooms. As she sat on a bench trying to process everything, a soft voice startled her. You seem troubled? Amelia turned to see an older woman approaching, her elegant dress and warm smile radiating kindness. She recognized her from the gala the other night. Margaret, one of Alexander's trusted advisors. I'm just overwhelmed, Amelia admitted, not wanting to reveal too much. Margaret sat beside her, her eyes twinkling with understanding. It's not easy, being in Alexander's world. He carries a lot on his shoulders, though he'd never admit it. Amelia hesitated, then asked, why does he feel the need to prove himself so much? Margaret's expression softened. Alexander's parents were demanding. They expected perfection in everything he did, and when he didn't meet their standards, they made him feel unworthy. He's been trying to prove them wrong ever since. Amelia felt a pang of sympathy. She had seen glimpses of Alexander's vulnerability, but hearing this made her understand him a little better. Still, it didn't excuse his actions. Thank you, Amelia said quietly, for telling me that. Margaret patted her hand. Don't give up on him just yet. Sometimes the people who push us away the most are the ones who need us the most. That evening, Amelia found Alexander in his study. He looked up as she entered, surprise flickering across his face. I still don't agree with what you did, she began, her tone firm but not angry. But I think I understand why you did it. Alexander watched her, waiting for her to continue. I know what it's like to feel like you have to prove yourself, Amelia said. But using people, lying to them, doesn't make you stronger. It just makes you lonelier. Alexander leaned back in his chair, his gaze thoughtful. And what would you suggest I do? Start by being honest, she said. Not just with me, but with yourself. There was a long pause before Alexander nodded. You're right. I've spent so long trying to control everything. I've forgotten what it feels like to just let go. Amelia offered a small smile. Maybe it's time you tried. The following days were different. Alexander began opening up to Amelia in small ways, sharing stories about his childhood, his struggles with his parents, and his fears about the future. In turn, Amelia found herself letting down her own walls, sharing her dreams, her family's struggles, and the burden of their debt. Their relationship, once strictly transactional, began to feel more genuine. But even as they grew closer, Amelia couldn't shake the nagging feeling that there was still something Alexander wasn't telling her. Her suspicions were confirmed one evening when she overheard Alexander on the phone, his voice low and urgent. No, the deal isn't final yet, but once the footage is edited, they'll have no reason to doubt me. Amelia's heart sank. Despite his promises, Alexander was still using her, and this time, she wasn't sure if she could forgive him. Amelia spent the night tossing and turning, her mind replaying Alexander's phone conversation. The trust they had been carefully building was now on shaky ground, and she wasn't sure what to do next. She had started to believe in the possibility of something real between them, but now it felt like she had been naive. By morning, she had made up her mind. If Alexander was still hiding things from her, she needed to confront him. No more avoiding the truth. Alexander was in his office when Amelia burst in, her eyes blazing with determination. He looked up from his laptop, surprised by her sudden entrance. "We need to talk," Amelia said, her voice firm. Alexander closed his laptop, leaning back in his chair. "What's on your mind?" Amelia stepped closer, her arms crossed. "Last night I overheard you on the phone. You were talking about the footage, about how it's part of some deal. Care to explain?" Alexander's expression hardened. "You were eavesdropping?" "I didn't have to try," she shot back. "You weren't exactly being discreet." There was a long pause as Alexander stared at her, his jaw clenched. Finally, he stood, walking over to the window. "It's true. I've been documenting our time together." Amelia's heart sank. Hearing him admit it didn't make it any easier. "Why, Alexander? After everything we've been through, why couldn't you just tell me?" Alexander turned to face her, his expression conflicted. "Because I didn't know how. At first it was all about the business deal, convincing investors that I had the stability and commitment they wanted to see. But then things changed." "Changed how?" Amelia demanded, her voice rising. "Because it sure doesn't feel like they have." Alexander stepped closer, his eyes searching hers. "Because I stopped seeing you as just part of the plan. You became more than that, Amelia. You became important to me." Amelia shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. "If I'm so important, then why couldn't you be honest with me?" "Because I was afraid," Alexander admitted, his voice raw. "Afraid that if you knew the truth, you'd leave, and I couldn't risk losing you." Amelia stared at him, her emotions swirling. Part of her wanted to believe him, to trust that his feelings were genuine, but the pain of his betrayal was too fresh, too raw. "I can't do this anymore," she said, her voice trembling. "I can't keep wondering if you're using me or if you actually care." "Amelia, please," Alexander said, his tone desperate. "Give me a chance to make this right." But Amelia shook her head, stepping back. "I need time to think. I can't be around you right now." Without another word, she turned and walked out of the room, leaving Alexander standing alone, his heart sinking as he watched her go. Amelia spent the next few days avoiding Alexander, retreating to the guest room and spending most of her time outside the house. She needed space to process everything that had happened, to figure out what she truly wanted. She found herself drawn to the gardens, where the vibrant flowers and peaceful atmosphere gave her a sense of solace. One afternoon, as she sat on a bench, Margaret appeared again, her kind smile offering a glimmer of comfort. "You seem lost," Margaret said, sitting beside her. Amelia sighed. "I don't know what to do. Alexander says he cares about me, but he's lied so many times. How can I trust him?" Margaret placed a gentle hand on Amelia's. "Alexander has always struggled with trust and vulnerability, but I've never seen him care about someone the way he cares about you." Amelia looked at her, surprised. "You think he's being genuine?" "I do," Margaret said, "but only you can decide if you're willing to give him another chance." Amelia nodded, her heart heavy. She knew Margaret was right. Ultimately, the decision was hers to make. That evening, Amelia found herself standing outside Alexander's office, her hand hovering over the doorknob. Taking a deep breath, she knocked lightly before stepping inside. Alexander looked up, surprise flickering across his face. "Amelia, we need to talk," she said, her tone firm but calm. "I've been doing a lot of thinking." Alexander nodded, gesturing for her to sit. "I'm listening." Amelia took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts. "I want to believe you, Alexander. I want to believe that your feelings for me are real. But you've broken my trust, and that's not something that can be fixed overnight." "I know," Alexander said quietly, "and I'll do whatever it takes to earn it back." Amelia met his gaze, her eyes searching his. "If we're going to move forward, there can't be any more secrets. No more lies. Everything has to be out in the open." Alexander nodded. "You have my word. No more secrets." Amelia hesitated, then said, "There's one more thing. I need you to delete the footage. All of it." Alexander's expression tightened, but he nodded. "Consider it done." Amelia stood, her heart still heavy but a small glimmer of hope beginning to shine through. "This is your chance to prove that you mean what you say, Alexander. Don't waste it." As she walked out of the room, Alexander sat back in his chair, a determined look on his face. He knew he had a long road ahead, but he was willing to do whatever it took to make things right. The days that followed felt like a delicate balancing act for both Amelia and Alexander. The tension between them was palpable, but there was also an unspoken understanding that something fragile and precious still lingered between them, something worth saving. Alexander took Amelia's words to heart. That evening, as promised, he called his tech team and instructed them to erase every piece of footage recorded during their time together. He even ensured that the cloud backups were permanently deleted. To prove his sincerity, he handed Amelia a confirmation receipt from the data recovery service. "This is my first step toward earning your trust back," Alexander said, his voice steady but tinged with vulnerability. "I hope it's enough for now." Amelia looked at the paper in her hands, her heart softening slightly. "It's a start," she replied quietly. The next morning, Alexander surprised Amelia with an invitation. "There's something I want to show you," he said, holding out an envelope. Inside was a single ticket to a private charity event he was hosting that evening. Amelia hesitated. "I'm not sure if I'm ready for public appearances with you." "This isn't about appearances," Alexander said gently. "It's about showing you who I really am when the cameras aren't rolling." Reluctantly, Amelia agreed. She knew she couldn't make a decision about their future without seeing all sides of Alexander. The charity event was held at an elegant venue, with chandeliers casting a warm glow over the room. The crowd was a mix of high-profile figures and beneficiaries from Alexander's philanthropic efforts. Amelia noticed how comfortable Alexander seemed as he mingled with the guests, his charm and sincerity evident in every interaction. But what truly surprised her was the focus of the event. A scholarship fund for underprivileged students. Alexander took the stage to deliver a heartfelt speech about the importance of education and giving back to the community. "Growing up, I didn't have everything handed to me," Alexander said, his voice resonating through the hall. "I know what it's like to feel like the odds are stacked against you. That's why I created this foundation, to give others the opportunities I was fortunate to receive." Amelia watched from the sidelines, her chest tightening. This was a side of Alexander she had never seen before, a man driven not by wealth or power but by a genuine desire to make a difference. After the event, Amelia found herself alone with Alexander on the venue's balcony. The cool night air brushed against her skin as they stood in silence, gazing out at the city lights. "I didn't realize how much you've done for others," Amelia admitted, her voice soft. "You're not the man I thought you were when we first met." Alexander turned to her, his expression earnest. "And you're not the woman I thought you were either. You've challenged me, Amelia. You've made me see things differently." Amelia hesitated, then said, "I want to believe that this is real, Alexander, but I'm scared." Alexander reached for her hand, his touch warm and steady. "I understand, and I'll spend as long as it takes proving to you that it is." Their eyes met, and for the first time in weeks, Amelia felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they could find their way back to each other. The next day, Alexander took another step to prove his commitment. He invited Amelia to his office, where he revealed plans for a new project, a community center aimed at providing resources for families in need. "I want you to be a part of this," Alexander said, sliding a blueprint across the table. "Your ideas, your compassion, it's exactly what this project needs." Amelia studied the plans, her heart swelling with a mix of admiration and disbelief. You really mean that? Absolutely, Alexander said. This isn't just a gesture. It's a way for us to build something meaningful together. For the first time in a long while, Amelia smiled, a genuine, hopeful smile. Maybe we can do this, Alexander. Maybe we can make it work. But just as things seemed to be improving, a new challenge emerged. One of Alexander's business rivals, a cunning and ruthless man named Victor Hayes, had caught wind of their contract arrangement and was threatening to expose it to the media. This could ruin everything, Alexander told Amelia during an emergency meeting. Not just for me, but for the community center and everything we're trying to build. Amelia's heart sank. What can we do? We fight back, Alexander said, determination flashing in his eyes. But we'll need to do it together. As they worked to counter Victor's threats, Amelia and Alexander found themselves growing closer. Late nights turned into heartfelt conversations, and shared challenges strengthened their bond. Slowly but surely, the walls between them began to crumble. Amelia realized that Alexander wasn't just a billionaire trying to save face. He was a man willing to fight for what mattered, even when it wasn't easy. And Alexander realized that Amelia wasn't just a desperate woman in need of money. She was a force of nature, someone who could stand by his side and make him a better person. As the days passed, their partnership became more than just a necessity. It became a choice. Together they were unstoppable, and for the first time, both began to believe that their fake marriage might just be the real thing after all. The tension between Alexander and Amelia was palpable as they worked to counter Victor Hayes' threats. The stakes were higher than ever, and every move they made was scrutinized by the public eye and the relentless media. But as the days turned into nights of strategizing and planning, the bond between them deepened. One evening, Alexander received a call from his legal team. "We've tracked Victor's source," his attorney explained. "He managed to obtain a copy of your marriage contract through one of your former employees. The document is incomplete, but it's damning enough to raise suspicion." Alexander's heart sank. If the contract were made public, it would not only tarnish his reputation but also jeopardize the community center project, which had become so important to both him and Amelia. "I'll handle this," Alexander said firmly, ending the call. He turned to Amelia, who had been silently watching him from across the room. "We need to meet Victor head-on." Amelia crossed her arms, worry etched on her face. "And how do you plan to do that? He's not the kind of man to back down easily." "By giving him a reason to," Alexander replied, his jaw tightening. "We're going to face this together." The next morning, Alexander and Amelia arranged a private meeting with Victor at one of Alexander's office buildings. The tension in the room was palpable as Victor walked in. A smug smile plastered across his face. "Well, well," Victor drawled, his voice dripping with mockery. "The golden couple themselves. To what do I owe the honor?" Alexander wasted no time. "We know you've got a copy of our marriage contract," he said, his tone cold and authoritative. "And we know you plan to use it to discredit us." Victor chuckled, leaning back in his chair. "You've done your homework, but knowing my plans doesn't change the fact that I hold all the cards." Amelia, who had been silent until now, stepped forward. "You don't hold as many cards as you think," she said, her voice steady and resolute. "That contract doesn't tell the whole story." Victor raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Oh, do tell." Amelia took a deep breath, meeting Victor's gaze head-on. "What started as a contract may have been unconventional, but it led to something real. You think you can tear us apart by exposing a piece of paper, but all you'll be doing is proving that love can grow in the most unexpected places." Victor laughed, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. "A touching story," he sneered. "But the public doesn't care about sentiment. They care about scandal." "Then let them see everything," Alexander said, pulling out a folder of documents. "These are the blueprints for our community center project, the emails detailing our philanthropic efforts, and the testimonials of the people we've helped along the way. Expose the contract if you want, but we'll make sure the world knows the full truth, not just your twisted version." Victor's smirk faltered. He hadn't anticipated this level of preparation or unity between Alexander and Amelia. "You've underestimated us," Alexander continued, his voice calm but commanding. "And if you release that contract, I'll make sure the backlash is worse for you than it ever could be for us." Victor hesitated, his confidence wavering. Finally, he leaned forward, his tone shifting. "You're playing a dangerous game, Alexander. But fine. You've made your point. I'll back off." After Victor left, Amelia let out a shaky breath. "Do you think he'll keep his word?" Alexander turned to her, his expression serious but hopeful. "He knows he's beaten. But even if he tries something else, we'll be ready." Amelia nodded, a sense of relief washing over her. For the first time in weeks, it felt like they were on solid ground. That evening, Alexander surprised Amelia with a quiet dinner at his penthouse. The city lights twinkled outside the floor-to-ceiling windows as soft music played in the background. "This feels normal," Amelia said, a small smile playing on her lips as she sipped her wine. "Almost like we're just two people enjoying a night together." "Maybe because that's what we are," Alexander replied, his gaze warm and unguarded. "No contracts, no pretenses, just us." Amelia's heart fluttered at his words. For so long she had been guarded, unsure of where they stood. But in that moment she realized that Alexander had become more than just a business partner or a means to an end. He had become someone she cared about deeply. "I never expected any of this," she admitted softly. "When I agreed to your deal, I thought I was walking into a nightmare. But now, I don't know what I would do without you." Alexander reached across the table, taking her hand in his. "You won't have to find out," he said, his voice filled with quiet determination. "Because I'm not going anywhere." As they sat there, the weight of the past week seemed to lift, leaving room for something new, something real. And for the first time, both Alexander and Amelia allowed themselves to hope that their future might be brighter than either of them had dared to imagine. The days following Victor Hayes' retreat brought a sense of calm that Alexander and Amelia hadn't experienced in weeks. The threat had subsided, the community center project was progressing, and the media buzz around their relationship had started to quiet down. But within that calm lay the unspoken reality. They were no longer bound by the contract that had brought them together. Their connection was now something far more personal, far more vulnerable. One sunny afternoon, Amelia found herself standing in the middle of the nearly completed community center. The construction team was hard at work, their voices blending with the hum of machinery. She marveled at how quickly the project had come together. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" Alexander's voice came from behind her, startling her slightly. "It really is," she said, turning to face him. "I can't believe it's almost done." He walked up beside her, his hands in his pockets as he surveyed the space. "This was your vision, Amelia. It wouldn't have happened without you." She gave a soft laugh, shaking her head. "I think you're giving me too much credit. You're the one who funded it. And you're the one who gave it a heart," he countered. "It's more than just a building. It's a place where people can feel safe, where they can rebuild their lives. That's all you." Amelia looked at him, her chest tightening at his words. "You make it sound like I'm some kind of hero." "You are," Alexander said simply, his gaze unwavering. The intensity in his eyes made her heart race. She quickly turned away, focusing on the mural being painted on one of the walls. It depicted a garden, vibrant and full of life, with a path winding through it. A metaphor, she supposed, for the journey they had been on. That evening, Amelia sat in her small apartment, her thoughts consumed by Alexander. She couldn't deny the growing feelings she had for him, but the idea of letting herself fall for him terrified her. She had spent so long guarding her heart, and now it felt like it was slipping out of her control. Her phone buzzed, pulling her out of her thoughts. It was a text from Alexander. "I have something for you. Can you come to the penthouse tonight?" Amelia hesitated for a moment before typing a reply. "I'll be there." When she arrived at the penthouse, Alexander was waiting for her in the living room, a small box in his hand. "What's this?" she asked, her curiosity piqued. "Open it and see," he said, handing it to her. Amelia carefully lifted the lid, revealing a delicate silver bracelet with a single charm in the shape of a flower. She recognized it immediately. It was the same flower from the mural at the community center. "It's beautiful," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It reminded me of you," Alexander said. Strong, resilient, and full of life, Amelia felt tears prick her eyes. "You didn't have to do this." "I wanted to," he said, "because you mean more to me than I can put into words." His confession hung in the air, the weight of it pressing down on her chest. She looked up at him, her heart pounding. "Alexander." He stepped closer, his eyes searching hers. I know this started as a deal, a way for both of us to get what we needed, but somewhere along the way, it became real for me. You became real for me." Amelia felt a tear slip down her cheek. "I don't know what to say." "Then don't say anything," Alexander said, his voice soft but steady. "Just tell me if you feel the same way." Her lips trembled as she tried to find the words. "I'm scared," she admitted. "I've been hurt before, and I don't know if I can survive it again." Alexander reached out, gently brushing her tear away. "You don't have to be scared with me. I'm not going to hurt you, Amelia. I promise." In that moment, something inside her broke free. The walls she had built, the fear that had kept her from letting anyone in. She took a step closer, her voice trembling but certain. "I think I'm falling for you." Alexander's face lit up with a mix of relief and joy. He pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly as if he never wanted to let go. And for the first time in a long time, Amelia felt truly safe. The next morning, Amelia woke up to the soft glow of sunlight streaming through the curtains of Alexander's bedroom. She turned to find him watching her, a gentle smile on his face. "Good morning," he said, his voice warm and tender. "Good morning," she replied, a shy smile playing on her lips. As they lay there, wrapped in each other's warmth, Amelia realized that her life had taken a turn she never could have anticipated. What had started as a desperate attempt to save her family had led her to a love she hadn't even dared to dream of. But even as they basked in their newfound happiness, Amelia couldn't shake the feeling that their journey was far from over. There were still challenges to face, truths to confront, and a future to build together. The days following Amelia and Alexander's heartfelt confession felt like a dream. Their connection deepened, no longer bound by contracts or expectations, but by the raw and unfiltered emotions they had uncovered. However, as much as they wanted to bask in their newfound happiness, reality had a way of pulling them back into its grasp. Amelia found herself at the community center, now in its final stages of completion. Volunteers and workers moved around her, putting the finishing touches on what had once been just a shared vision. The vibrant mural on the wall seemed to glow in the afternoon sun, a testament to the resilience and unity the center represented. "Amelia!" a voice called out, interrupting her thoughts. It was Sarah, one of the volunteers who had become a close friend over the course of the project. "Hey, Sarah," Amelia said, smiling warmly. "I just wanted to say thank you," Sarah said, her eyes brimming with emotion. "This center, it's going to change so many lives. You've done something amazing." Amelia felt a lump form in her throat. "I couldn't have done it without Alexander," she said softly. "He's been my rock through all of this." Sarah's smile widened. "You two are perfect for each other. I can see it in the way he looks at you." Amelia's cheeks flushed. She hadn't realized how obvious her feelings had become, but before she could respond, her phone buzzed in her pocket. It was a message from Alexander. "Can we talk? Something important has come up." When Amelia arrived at the penthouse, Alexander was waiting for her in the living room. His expression was serious, and it immediately put her on edge. "What's wrong?" she asked, her voice tinged with worry. Alexander gestured for her to sit down. "There's something I need to tell you," he began, his tone careful. "It's about Victor Hayes." The mention of the name sent a chill down Amelia's spine. "What about him?" "He's been arrested," Alexander said. "The authorities have been investigating his dealings for months, and they finally had enough evidence to take him down." Amelia's eyes widened. "Arrested? Does this mean—" "It means we're safe," Alexander said, reaching for her hand. "You're safe. He can't hurt you anymore." Relief washed over Amelia like a wave, but it was quickly replaced by another emotion. Anger. "I can't believe he thought he could manipulate us like that." "He underestimated you," Alexander said, his voice filled with admiration. "You stood your ground, Amelia. You're stronger than he could ever hope to be." Amelia looked down at their intertwined hands, her heart swelling with gratitude. "I couldn't have done it without you." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the news settling over them. But as the tension began to lift, Alexander's expression softened. "There's one more thing," he said, pulling out a small envelope from his pocket. "I've been holding on to this, waiting for the right moment." Amelia took the envelope, her hands trembling slightly. Inside was a letter addressed to her, written in Alexander's neat handwriting. She unfolded the letter, her eyes scanning the words. It was a heartfelt confession of his feelings, recounting the journey they had been on together and the depth of his love for her. By the time she reached the end, tears were streaming down her face. She looked up at Alexander, her voice trembling. "You wrote this?" "I did," he said, his own voice thick with emotion. "Because I wanted you to know how much you mean to me, how much you've changed my life." Amelia threw her arms around him, holding him tightly. "I love you," she whispered, the words spilling out before she could stop them. "I love you so much." Alexander pulled back just enough to look into her eyes. "I love you too," he said, his voice steady and sure. More than anything. As the weeks went by, their relationship continued to flourish. The community center opened to widespread acclaim, drawing attention from both the media and philanthropic organizations. Amelia and Alexander became a symbol of hope and resilience, their story inspiring others to believe in second chances. But as they stood together at the grand opening ceremony, surrounded by friends and supporters, Amelia couldn't help but feel that their journey was just beginning. The challenges they had faced had only strengthened their bond, and now they were ready to face whatever the future held, together. Months later, life had taken on a new rhythm for Amelia and Alexander. Their story had transitioned from one of struggle and deception to a testament of resilience, love, and unwavering commitment. The community center had become a thriving hub of activity, with children laughing in the halls and families finding support within its welcoming walls. Amelia had fully embraced her role as the center's director, her passion and dedication evident in every detail. Alexander, though busy managing his business empire, made it a priority to support her, often joining her for events and fundraisers. The two of them had become a team in every sense of the word. One sunny afternoon, as Amelia walked through the bustling center, she was approached by a young girl holding a colorful drawing. "Miss Amelia, I made this for you," the girl exclaimed, her eyes shining with excitement. Amelia knelt down to accept the drawing, her heart swelling at the sight of a vibrant depiction of the center, complete with smiling stick figures. "Thank you, sweetheart," she said warmly. "This is beautiful." The girl beamed and ran off to join her friends. Amelia watched her go, her chest tight with gratitude. This was what it had all been for. The children, the families, the chance to make a difference. As she turned to head back to her office, she spotted Alexander standing near the entrance. He was dressed casually, but his presence still radiated confidence and charisma. He waved her over with a smile. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her surprise evident. "I wanted to take you somewhere," he said, holding out his hand. "It's a surprise." Amelia hesitated for a moment, then placed her hand in his. "Okay," she said with a laugh, "but this better be good." Alexander drove them to a secluded area just outside the city, where a sprawling piece of land stretched out before them. It was breathtaking, with rolling hills, lush greenery, and a serene lake glistening in the sunlight. Amelia stepped out of the car, her eyes wide with wonder. "What is this place?" she asked, turning to Alexander. "It's ours," he said simply. "I bought it for us, to build our future." Amelia's breath caught in her throat. "Alexander, I know we've been through a lot," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "And I know that life won't always be easy, but I want us to have a place that's just ours, a place where we can build a life together, free from all the noise and chaos." Tears filled Amelia's eyes as she looked out at the beautiful landscape. She could already picture their life here. Quiet mornings by the lake, family gatherings on the porch, and a home filled with love and laughter. "It's perfect," she whispered, turning to face him. "Thank you." Alexander reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Amelia's heart skipped a beat as he opened it to reveal a stunning diamond ring. "I know we started this journey as strangers," he said, dropping to one knee, "but somewhere along the way, you became the most important person in my life. Amelia, will you marry me? For real this time?" Amelia's hands flew to her mouth as she nodded, unable to speak through her tears. "Yes," she finally managed. "1,000 times, yes?" Alexander slipped the ring onto her finger and stood, pulling her into a deep, heartfelt embrace. They stood together, framed by the breathtaking landscape, their hearts full, and their future bright. Their wedding was a small, intimate affair held on the very land Alexander had purchased. Surrounded by close friends and family, they exchanged heartfelt vows, promising to love and support each other through whatever life brought their way. As they danced under the stars that night, Amelia felt a sense of peace she had never known. The hardships and challenges they had faced had only made their love stronger, and now they were ready to face the future together. In the years that followed, their lives were filled with joy and purpose. The community center continued to thrive, expanding its reach and helping countless families. Amelia and Alexander built their dream home on the land, creating a sanctuary where they could escape the pressures of the world. Their love story became an inspiration to those around them, a reminder that even in the face of adversity, love could prevail. And as they sat together on their porch, watching the sun set over the lake, they knew that they had truly found their happily ever after. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey. Let us know what you thought of this story, and stay tuned for more heartwarming tales of love, resilience, and hope. Resilience and hope. Resilience and hope.